No culture can survive if it attempts to be exclusive. Mahatma Gandhi. In this screencast, we're going to lay a basic foundation of intercultural communication, specifically what is culture and the importance of studying culture. I plan to move quickly, so keeping the screencast well under 10 minutes. Please take notes and also tweet, ideally 3 times, using the hashtag CO101, and try to include one other hashtag or username. For example, throw in my username, @ProfMatty. So what is culture? If a teacher asked you to do a report on a country, take a moment and think about what you might include in that report on a different country. You might include government, money, religion, laws, food, art, clothing, exports, imports, geography, religion. All of these things transcend culture. So what is culture? It's a lifestyle, a specialized lifestyle of a group of people. And it includes things that are seen, behaviors, artifacts, and how they communicate. If you think about culture as an iceberg, these things, behaviors, artifacts, and how they communicate are generally seen and are on top of the waterline, the part of the iceberg that you see. However, going below the waterline on that iceberg, values, beliefs, ideals, ways of thinking. These are things that are not necessarily seen, and we tend to make assumptions about why people act the way they do. So, continuing on with defining culture, culture is something also that is passed down from one generation to the next to the next. And the process in which culture is passed down is called enculturation. And so how does enculturation happen? How do things get passed down from great-grandmother to grandmother to daughter to grandson? And how does this process happen? Through communication. And so let's continue on and look at some other elements of defining culture. Let's look at sex versus gender. Sex is biological. It has to do with organs and labeling people a man or a woman. Gender is something very different and varies dependent on the culture. Gender is a social construction. When we look at masculinity versus femininity, it's really how that culture has constructed and defined those terms. And so social construction is something that people make, and it can specifically involves ideas and how things are viewed, and certainly gender is a social construction. Enculturation and acculturation, we just talked about enculturation. It's the way we learn about our own culture. How do we learn right from wrong? What are culture values? What's important to us? That is all enculturation versus acculturation. And I'll encourage all of you to go on a study abroad trip and see other places in the world. Acculturation is the ways in which we learn about other cultures. And so if you've ever gotten homesick or gone overseas and were curious about why people acted the way they do, that is you adapting into and trying to understand other cultures that are different from your own. Acculturation. So what's the importance of culture in communication? Look at the world right now. The world's a rapidly changing place, particularly with demographic changes. People are migrating from all over the world. The world is a very small place in terms of getting from one area to another. With these demographic changes, puts an importance on understanding other people and where they're from and how they communicate. Also, just general cultural sensitivity. Being open-minded and sensitive to other cultures. For a long time, people took an assimilation perspective, which means that when people come into our culture, we expect them to act how we act. Nowadays, that seems to be very much changing. And we look for more cultural sensitivity and diversity and expect people to bring in their own values, their own beliefs, their own customs into our culture. And it really becomes more of a big melting pot of people and cultures. Economic interdependency is another reason to study intercultural communication. We are, and the world is reliant on each other for economic viability. And that forces us to communicate with people from other cultures, travel there, understand them, communicate ideas with them so that there can be economic viability. But we live in a world now where products are made and shipped all over the world, which means we're interdependent on each other. Communication and technology. Boy, we can see the whole world through technology right now, and we can communicate through technology to anyone else in the world. Politeness is another reason to study intercultural communication. It's really where intercultural communication starts. Being polite and understanding what that means and how to effectively engage with people who are different than you. And all of this leads to communication competence. The ability to communicate effectively in a given situation, and which may not be the same as the next context that you walk into. Communication competence is all about adjusting to the context that you're in and being effective in that context. So let's look at why, again, some more reasons to think about cultural perspectives. And one is to think about principles that are universal versus principles that are relative. Politeness, I can refer back to that. Politeness seems to be a universal principle. We all want to be polite towards others. However, how we demonstrate politeness will vary in any given culture. Some people handshake when they meet, others kiss on the cheek, others bow, others hug. And so really distinguishing what is relative to that culture and what is necessary to communicate becomes really important. The examples of the pictures that you see are two people smiling. Well, smiling could be seen as a universal communication principle. However, different cultures value how to smile. Some openly smile, as you see in the man in the top picture. Other cultures show more humility and value hiding smile, and also it's seen as, in some cultures, seen as impolite to have your mouth open, and therefore you see this person covering their mouth. So understanding universal versus relative cultural understandings. Culture influences communication of all types, whether it be what you're wearing, what you purchase, what you say, how you say it. All of these things are influenced by your cultural perspective. And you definitely want to be able to effectively communicate with people who are different than you. And that may not be, that could be the person sitting next to you in class or your new roommate. But you're going to run into people who are culturally different than you everywhere. Also, with this form of study, it helps us understand what is acceptable in what context and what is not. And hopefully we'll advance that thinking as we move forward. So, in conclusion, we've defined culture and we've talked about the importance of studying intercultural communication. And I'm curious for you to reflect at this point on how you did with note-taking and tweeting. If you got out a few tweets, or if you're going to go back to your notes and maybe edit a phrase and put it out there. And here are the questions that I want you to think about when you go to the discussion board. First of all, describe your own culture. What does your culture value? If you were going to share your culture with someone, what would you tell them about your culture? What are you proud of? What would you share with them? What physical items would you show them that represent your culture? What artifacts, what man-made items would you show them that represent your culture? And secondly, tell us something that you love about your culture. What are you proud of? What are you excited about? What do you really care about? And conversely, tell us something that about your culture that you don't agree with, and explain. Again, keep these to maybe a couple paragraphs per bullet in these questions, and again, get your ideas out there, and don't forget to comment on your peers' writing and thoughts as well.